What can take the 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton to describe a career as the worst you have experienced? Today we are going to discover why the 2025 Grand Prix was the true breakdown point in his adventure with Ferrari, and why this could be just the beginning of the end. Barcelona, one of the cathedrals of motoring, received Formula One with high expectations. But what the Spanish public witnessed was a technical and psychological collapse of one of the greatest champions of history. Lewis Hamilton, 7 times world champion, started from 5th position with the hope of reverse an irregular season. Everything indicated that the Catalan layout, traditionally favorable to Ferrari in career rhythm simulations, could offer an opportunity to recover ground against McLaren and Red Bull. However, the traffic lights barely went out, the script began to crack. The first curve offered a glimpse of hope. Hamilton cleanly advanced George Russell, executing a surgical maneuver inside the interior that allowed him to move momentarily in hunting position. But that illusion lasted just a few laps. From the first turns, the SF-25 sensors began to report instability in the rear axle. Hamilton immediately noticed the loss of adhesion, especially in the medium-speed curves, where the car did not offer any reliable feedback. What should be a strategic control career became a mechanical torture. On the 10th, the first psychological mezzo arrived. Ferrari ordered Hamilton to let Charles Leclerc. The order, although logical from the point of view of equipment because the rhythm of Monegasco was visibly superior, was devastating for the morale of a pilot who had reached Maranello to lead. It was not the first time in the season that received such an instruction, but the most humiliating. Being relegated by your own team so early in the race in a circuit where to advance is complicated, it was an emotional blow that destabilized it even more. The drama intensified during the middle phase of the race. While Hamilton tried to maintain rhythm in medium tires, the degradation of the rear compound was so intense that he began to lose traction even in high adhesion sections. The radio between him and his engineer was filled with messages loaded with frustration. Each lap was a struggle to keep the car on the track, each curve an error roulette. When the cycle of stops and boxes arrived, Ferrari committed a strategic inaccuracy that allowed both Mercedes to overcome it. A situation that, under normal conditions, should have been avoided. The moment of greatest humiliation reached the end, in the penultimate return. Nico Hülkenberg, at the wheel of a Sauber visibly lower on paper, advanced it in the middle of the main line using fresher tires. It was not a risky maneuver or a Hamilton error. It was a pure reflection of technical impotence. Hamilton had fallen to 7th position. Only the penalty after Max Verstappen allowed him to ascend a place, crossing the goal in a bitter 6th position, a position below where he started. The comparison with Leclerc was devastating. The Monegasco, with the same car, had traced from the 7th place to the podium, including a spectacular overtaking to Verstappen after the restart of the safety car. Hamilton, on the other hand, seemed to fight against his own car, unable to extract any competitive performance. More than a failed race, it was a clear symptom of a total disconnection between pilot, car, and equipment. In Barcelona, Hamilton's myth found its technical limit, and Ferrari revealed the deep cracks that threatened to destroy their season. Hamilton's disaster at the Spain Grand Prix cannot be fully understood without thoroughly analyzing the SF-25, a car that, beyond its elegant design and initial technical promises, has turned out to be a headache for both pilots and engineers. In modern Formula One, the performance of a car is not measured only by the speed in a straight line or its braking capacity, but for something much more complex: the operational consistency. And in this regard, Ferrari 2025 is a critical case. The SF-25 has a structural defect that conditions it in all circuits, an extremely narrow operational window. This means that, to perform to the maximum, it needs multiple variables to be aligned precisely. Ambient temperature, type of asphalt, tire pressure, aerodynamic balance, and even the conduction style. When one of these elements deviates just some degrees from the ideal, the car loses effectiveness. There is no margin of adaptation. In a calendar like 2025, where conditions vary drastically from one track to another, this is practically a conviction. But the problem is not only technical, it is deeply personal for Hamilton. His pilot style, forged for years with Mercedes, is based on the accuracy of the front train. He likes to feel a firm direction, which allows him to attack the curve entrance with confidence. The SF-25, on the other hand, behaves with a clear tendency to survive, especially in slow and sock curves. The car is nervous, unstable, and requires constant steering wheel adjustments, something that does not adapt to the British methodical approach. It is as if the car and the pilot spoke different languages. During the weekend in Barcelona, free training was a clear warning of what was to come. In the second session, Hamilton met an unpredictable car, unable to maintain constant aerodynamic load in high-speed curves. The classification simulations left him in the 11th position, well below expected. From that moment, the team tried to make urgent adjustments, modifications in the front wing, changes in the suspension, and even tests with different levels of rake. Nothing worked. The lack of response of the car was so marked that in the post-carrier analysis it was concluded that the SF-25 had an unidentified problem in the interaction between the chassis and the flat background, which compromised the airflow and therefore the stability. In addition, tire management has become another obvious weak point. Ferrari not only fails to heat the tires optimally in the initial phase of stint, but suffers from accelerated degradation in the rear. This combination is lethal. Instability at the beginning and loss of performance at the end. It is like running a marathon with a shoe that does not adjust and wears out ahead of time. And this, for a pilot who builds his career about precision and control, is simply unacceptable. The most alarming thing is that this situation does not seem to have an immediate solution. Maranello engineers have recognized in internal communications that the development of SF-25 is in a dead end. Any structural change would require time, resources, and possibly a ground redesign and rear suspension. In full season, that is practically unfeasible without compromising other areas of performance. The only thing that remains is to try career configuration patches after career, hoping to find a balance that works just to survive. Hamilton's frustration is understandable. It's not just that the car is slow. It does not respond, it does not offer consistency, and does not allow to build a base of trust. In a sport where trust between pilot and machine is everything, Ferrari has delivered a weapon that, more than tool, looks like a trap. The SF-25, far from being the car that should return to the rampant Cavallino to the top, is becoming the symbol of its deepest technical crisis in years. In Formula One, the relationship between the pilot and his car is almost intimate. It is a millimeter dance where mutual trust decides whether it is competed by victories or is shipwrecked in irrelevance. Lewis Hamilton, a man who has made history dominating in machines that looked like extensions of his body, is now in a heartbreaking internal struggle. The SF-25 is not only a problematic car, it is an invisible barrier that separates it from everything that has been known. In this battle between man and the machine, the pilot is losing ground, not due to lack of talent, but because the car is not willing to give in. What makes this situation particularly difficult for Hamilton is the paradox in which it is. He is a pilot who arrived in Ferrari with the mission of leading a transformation. There was talk of his experience, his intelligence for development, his ability to motivate a team as he did in Mercedes for a decade. However, what he has found is an environment that is not yet prepared to follow his rhythm or to adapt to his needs. Every time you ask for a modification, the car reacts unpredictably. Each setup suggestion seems to open new cracks instead of closing existing ones. Charles Leclerc, his teammate, is not suffering in the same way. And this adds another pressure layer. Monegasco has built a more organic relationship with SF-25. Know their limits, their defects, and have learned to adapt to them, even to exploit them. His performance in Barcelona was the clearest test. He traced to the podium and left behind direct rivals with maneuvers that showed total confidence in the car. For Hamilton, seeing that from the rearview mirror was more painful than any overtaking. It is not only a performance difference but pure compatibility. The ironic thing is that Hamilton has made more efforts to adapt in Ferrari than at any other time in his career. He has changed his braking style, he has modified his focus on curve management, he has even adjusted his simulator routine. But each sacrifice has been responded with more frustration. It is as if, for the first time, all your knowledge, all your mastery, were not enough to tame the red beast. In Ferrari's box, the atmosphere begins to tense. There are whispers about the technical direction, doubts about the development approach, and in the background, a question that nobody wants to ask out loud. Hamilton was wrong to come to Ferrari? The expectations were very high. The headlines celebrated him as the return of a myth to the greatest team in history. But the results have been cold, relentless, and begin to erode the romantic narrative that surrounded its signing. The 2025 Grand Prix not only marked a disappointing race for Lewis Hamilton, it was the mirror in which the harsh reality of an alliance that does not finish curdling was reflected. Beyond the final classification, beyond the sixth place in the results, which was evidenced in Barcelona, was a deep fracture between the myth and its machine. And in that fracture, a disturbing scenario begins to delineate, the beginning of the end. Ferrari, meanwhile, does not seem to have clear answers. The team lives in a constant duality. On the one hand, it aspires to compete against McLaren and Red Bull, but on the other continues to stumble upon structural errors that have been dragging for years. The most disturbing is external perception. In the paddock, murmurs about the viability of this union are increasingly frequent. Some wonder if Hamilton did not make a strategic mistake by leaving Mercedes. Others dare to talk about an early way out if the results do not change soon. In any case, the narrative of this season has ceased to be a story of redemption to become a resistance, and perhaps, of renunciation. There may still be time to reverse the course, to rewrite this story with an unexpected turn. But the clock runs, the season advances, and each race becomes a silent countdown. Barcelona was more than a low point. It was a warning.